Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, go ahead, Paul, whenever you're ready.
Okay, it is, I believe, 5:31. I'd like to call the utility meeting to order at this time. This time, I would like to welcome Mr. Bergant to explain things about the wastewater plant and several improvements that need to be accomplished over time.
Hello, everybody. I apologize. I have an old school monitor and don't have a camera on it. Could everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the first thing I need to talk about is an insurance claim that we made for the EQ basin liner repair. The estimate came to around $41,000, and the insurance company is going to cover all of it. But the way I understand it, they're going to write the check to the city, and then the city will actually pay the company that makes the repairs. I talked with Brian about this briefly, so I'm not real sure how this works, but I assume that we need to appropriate the money to pay, and then we'll get reimbursed.
Yeah, I wasn't real sure on how they've done that in the past, but I mean, really what's going to end up happening is the insurance company will give us the money and then we'll apply it to the expense line. So there really won't be any, I mean, there technically won't be an appropriation needed to pay the bill because it's going to come from the insurance money ultimately.
We did get a check today that I turned over to Tammy. I don't know if you talked to her yet, for like $22,000. It was part of it, and then they'll pay the rest upon completion of the repairs.
Yeah, she did tell me. So, I mean, as far as the accounting of it, I mean, I think you don't necessarily need appropriation. I mean, it's obviously an important topic to bring up with council just for their, awareness of it and what's going on.
Okay. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I haven't got the estimate yet, is a purposes and needs assessment that I'd like to have done at the plant from a consulting engineer to kind of tell us where we are going into the future. We're starting to see some age on some of the equipment. Some of the repair bills are getting a little expensive. There's some stimulus money out there. Brian, I believe we're about a year and a half away from being debt free from our last upgrade. So I just wanted to put it out there that I hope to have an estimate. I thought I would by tonight, but I hope to have it by the next utility committee meeting. And there's always an open invitation if anybody wants to come down, and sometimes it's easier to show you some of the things that we need to address rather than tell you about it on here.
I recently was down there. It was an eye-opening experience to see how that all operates. So
that's really all I have tonight. I thought I would have more for you, but I don't yet.
Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions for this at this time before the rest is brought up next month? If not, then I would like to ask Mrs. Dubinsky for a report pertaining to the, I believe, gas aggregate.
Yes, this is just asking councils, well, for the mayor to enter into an extension of the current agreement with Constellation. It would be effective October 1st through September 30th of 2023 at $2.99 per MCF.
Does anybody have any comments for what we just spoken about?
Is $2.99 our current rate?
It's $2.97 right now.
Okay.
And it's possible this $2.99 could go down, but we're just asking for a price request at this time of $2.99. And this price request expires on August 1st, so that we could lock it in.
So if it went down, we would be able to lock it in at the lower rate.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, since it sounds like there are no other comments, I would like to thank you for bringing this to council far enough in advance.
You're
That makes
welcome.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I want to ask if there are any comments pertaining to either subject from the mayor.
No, they're rather self-descript.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll close utility meeting at 5:37.
Christina, I think you're.
I'm having some technical issues today as we go into the Information Systems Committee meeting. It is not our system, it is mine. So I apologize for that. I'm having some internet issues at home. I'm going to call the Information Systems Committee to order at 5:38 p.m. The item we have on the agenda is an update from Quality IP. I see Ryan is here and Katie is here as well. So if you guys want to go ahead and share what you got.
Yes, so we're very excited about the way that the relationship has worked over the last 3 years. We feel that we've accomplished a lot of projects, especially related to security initiatives, new phone system. We've had to adapt quite a bit over the last year related to COVID, and we feel that the projects and infrastructure have best positioned us to adapt the flexibility that we need and provide a consistent user experience for all city employees. We're looking at a renewal that's up in August, and last year we met back in April and talked about being able to keep costs consistent, the same rate for another year to see where the city was at through the COVID, where financials were at. And we were able to, I think, provide more staff than what the city was asking for and provide the best user experience possible. A lot of change, we drastically restructured the telecommunications system to save money and provide more bandwidth. We're looking at adding new projects like police cruisers and downtown wireless. And so we're really excited about where the city is going, and we're just happy to be a part of it and want to answer any questions you might have in regards to specific technology or upcoming contracts.
Yes, what would be your price point for this next coming year comparatively to in the past?
Yeah, so we were looking at we've added new services. The phone when we started with about 3 years ago, the phone system services were not part of our agreement. We've added some security products related to the way that you these new services need to be accounted for in some way. We're proposing a $650 a month increase, but not charging hourly for the work that is normally done related to the new services. So we feel it's a net win. When you look at it aggregately, how many hours are spent working with it's mostly related to the Cisco proficiency, the specialized services that are the certified services that are required to support the products that are in place today. We added the telecom management piece. The projects work would not be billed extra, like we talked about in the past, with related to the police cruisers and downtown wireless and expansion of the wireless to the parks. We also talked about some lift station work and water tower work. And those things would all be inclusive in the agreement. So it would include cost of living adjustments. But the biggest part is we found that when we kept the cost static last year, we were the mindset was to lead with our help desk, where you would always call in and talk to a remote technician. And that model wasn't well received. What we found that it became to the point where we needed to provide regular on-site services. And for that reason, we, out of our own pocket, we started to allocate a person at the city of Ravenna 3 days a week to accommodate. So static staffing of on-site resources in the various buildings, along with the certified services, has led to what we feel is a fair adjustment to the agreement for an upcoming term.
Do you believe the communication will be enhanced?
Yeah, we're always looking to improve the collaboration tools with the city. There's new names like Jabber related to the phone system with mobility services. Being able to work into the 911 services, not emergency and emergency bridge through the Cisco phone system has been a tremendous win. And having instant messaging capabilities, Microsoft Office 365 capabilities with OneDrive and SharePoint. We've done a lot with the cloud, and I feel that the city has fully embraced the cloud to position yourself in a way that provides the best communication experience possible.
I think on my end, there's been the communication with Quality IP, I think has been good for me, but I think there's also what I've said to the mayor, what I've said to Ryan and Katie. In this agreement, we don't have somebody here who's going to be on site 40 hours a week. So there's some responsibility on us to understand at the very basic minimum of some of these IT issues that we might run into so that we can communicate that to Quality IP. If we want somebody here 5 days a week, then we need to pay for it. And I don't think we had high hopes, I think, for Gary Bishop to fill in some of this role. But really, he's just translating some of the problems that we identify. So we're not identifying anything new. It's still on us or the administration to identify some of these problems and communicate that to Quality IP. It's still a city consultant relationship. We don't have somebody here who is an employee. I know that they've mentioned, structuring the deal or the agreement in the past with other cities like that, where they are the de facto IT director. But then the deal or the agreement would have to be structured that way. And I think another point, and Mayor, feel free to jump in on this too, because I'd like to hear your thoughts, especially as we're talking about either another one-year deal or if the goal is a multi-year deal. And then also, I think the question is still out there, can we get Gary Bishop or someone to help write a quote and does council want to go out for bids? I think that's the other big question here as well. So I'll turn it over to you, Mayor, and then we can ask about the bidding question. But this is coming up in August, so if we want to bid out, we're gonna have to move pretty quick. And somebody's gonna have to fill in a lot of those details to write the RFP.
Well, as I look at this, I go back to where we started from. where everything that we had to be rebuilt in our original agreement. And I know that there were people that experienced some problems through that time period. But for me, I expected there to be problems because of the magnitude of straightening things out that we had here. The question between hiring a person to do this internally, I still think that leaves us in a bad spot from the standpoint that with vacations and days off and those sorts of things, you're not going to get coverage. And if those of you that were here when we had a full-time IT person, you remember you would wait months to see him at times, if you did ever see him at times. They have stepped up and attempted to streamline our operations so that they are kind of standardized and easier to work on. And I know we still experience some problems. I know Bill had a problem out at the wastewater treatment plant, but after that was fixed, he's been okay with what's been going on. And I doubt he's still on. Well, yes, he is. He is still on. If I'm said anything that isn't accurate, Bill, let me know. As we look at moving up, I thought the installation of the phone system had very few problems with it. And I was appreciative of that. We have had some problems at the rack, which have been more difficult to deal with. And that's a combination, and that came about basically because of the way our machines time out now with the new security system. I'm waiting to see if mine shuts off here in a few minutes. Usually when I am doing right now, about every 15 minutes, I just call up the extra things available on the bottom line and then put it back down again. And it's enough activity to know that you're there. The problems at the rack came about from the standpoint that a 15-minute time period didn't work very well for them without having to log back on again because they had responsibilities as well as bringing people in and collecting the money. They have responsibilities to clean the equipment, be sure that it's safe for the people. They're cleaned after every hour. They wipe the whole place down. I don't know if you've been out there, but I'm amazed at how clean the rack is. It's stark, at least it was to me when I went in there. But we've been working to get that straightened out, and I did ask them to extend the timing out there to an hour. And I had to sign off that I was taking the responsibility for that. But Judy was quite forceful in that needed to be done in order to keep things running at the rack the way it needed to happen. And I know that's a compromising of the security that we're trying to get. But I go back to a time when I put Norton on a machine that I had at the house to protect the equipment. And it took up so much space on the machine, it dictated everything that happened. And I rarely was able to do anything complicated on my machine at home until I got rid of Norton. So you can, there's a balance when you're looking for security that you have to reach. You want to make it as secure as you can, but you still have to be able to function with your daily work that needs to be done. And that's what we're looking at there. I personally have not been unhappy with Quality IP anytime I have contacted them, they have responded quickly to that. I have asked, and I did this a while ago, Tim Content, when people send a ticket in, I ask them to copy the ticket to Tim, and Tim now rides herd on how quickly they're getting done. And I felt that Quality IP was committed to making sure we didn't get these long waits on tickets. I had a problem last week with my machine here, and I got very prompt service, and you may say, well, that's because you're the mayor. I'm the last one I try to have convenient. I've got other people that have responsibilities at the water plant, the wastewater treatment plant. You name the departments, the finance department, all those programs have to work every day in order for us to be efficient. So this is a difficult task that we're asking folks to do. Now I'll go along with what council recommends if they want to look into this farther. But anytime I have asked to have a meeting with the people at IP, I've had no trouble scheduling it or getting a phone call back. I guess there is a recent development that has raised some concern for folks, and that's the fact that Nick is moved off to another job. And I assume you have plans or are working on plans to replace Nick or what he does with that. But that was enough to raise some eyebrows here that he seems like a big loss. From our standpoint, he's been effective when he comes in. With that, Katie has been effective also for us. I think that she probably has had a little more stress than anybody else has from Quality IP. But we've managed to get the things taken care of, and we'll continue to work on the problems at the RAC because it's a unique place and the way that it runs. And she depends on a lot of help out there that they're quite capable when the equipment works the way they're used to it working. If it doesn't work that way, it can cause a problem. And that's an adaptation that I support for Judy. She's got a huge task out there, and she's expected to stay solvent. And there's a lot of pressure, and she's done a heck of a job out there. So I don't want to see her having problems with the equipment. I would think you would gather from my comments and conversations that I've been pleased with the work they've done, and I have no problem with it doing it again. That's all I have.
I just had a quick question as far as, I know that we had the ticketing system before where you'd send an email if you were having an issue or a phone call. And now we do have someone available those 3 days a week. How has that been? Has that changed things? Has that made things better as far as from an administration standpoint? Anybody else? Feel free to answer that.
I mean, I would say so. I mean, there was some issues, I think, and a lot of it was COVID related. So we just had some major network issues, I think, last fall, and then they didn't have people on site. But that all did finally get resolved. It was complicated how to fix all that, but
it certainly, yeah, COVID has definitely challenged all of our technology.
Absolutely.
So,
but since they've had people on site, it's been May and Katie. Yeah, it's been a much better. And I think, you know, I've personally had, good experiences with them as well. So I think things seem to be running pretty smoothly now.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think some of this too, we as council can say yes or no to, but ultimately we're not the people using the computers every day that, in the lockout, the 15 minutes and then you get locked out. Really that decision comes from the mayor. So when Nick, is giving you or Katie is giving you that hard conversation of no, we're not going to extend it or something, that I think it needs to come from the mayor as, this is what the decision is on some of those instances. And the same thing with the security that we ran into with some of those emails coming from the outside, just some of those small things we could, we're not the ones using it, I guess is my point, or printers, whatever it is. The administration is using that. So taking the direction from the mayor and people inside city hall, I think is crucial to this whole process.
Does the new contract include on-site staff from Quality IP 3 days a week still, or will that change?
The current contract doesn't. We've just been providing it, but we are offering that in the upcoming agreement.
So that is part of the new agreement.
It
That's
is.
part of the $650 increase.
Yeah, and we talked about a lot of different changes too, and with change is on discomfort, and not like with a major phone system isn't just the phone system change, it's also the networking that goes behind it, the firewalls, the telecommunications. So being able to let the dust settle on some of that, I think we're starting to see the fruits of that labor. And it's been pretty quiet in terms, every ticket is followed up with a customer satisfaction request where we're asked for feedback related to your experience on the ticket. And we've had perfect reviews for the entire year since for 2021. So we feel that, there has been isolated incidents that have been, that sometimes it's best practice, sometimes it's circumstance, but we feel that we're positioned well for the future.
And I think part of that increase too, Ryan, is the phone support. Like right now, we do not have phone support as part of our contract. I know it was before I was here, but they were talking about adding it, I think back in 19 or early 20. But I think we decided at that point not to add it because of the price was pretty expensive. But I think you're including it kind of in this bundle now, adding the on-site, adding the phone service and all that as part of that increase.
It is, and it's really important to mention that too, because you used to pay another vendor for phone system changes. And anytime there's a staff change out, onboarding and offboarding, that requires someone of expertise to log into the system and make changes. And when we sold the phone system to the city, we proposed that same all-inclusive arrangement for $750 a month without the on-site representation. But we felt that a longer term contract over 36 months, we could include those services 3 days a week and also include the Cisco Premier certification services required to not only support the phone system, but the firewalls that we've implemented. We felt that was the best design for the city.
So in regards to moving forward, today we are just providing an update from Quality IP. We wanted them to come in and share the changes that they've made, the things that they're doing. As far as moving forward, we certainly can have that as a discussion as council. But today, I just want to make sure everybody understands that this is just an update because we don't get to hear from them all the time. We just only hear from them when things aren't running smoothly, right? So it's nice to hear the things that have ran smoothly and what they're working on as far as the best way to support the city. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
I would like to include that there's some other major wins we've included. This year, we've set up a disaster recovery site at the annex. So there's live replication of services where we can fail over real time in the event that something were to happen at City Hall. The extended support hours are also another significant factor in the equation. Not only are we providing on-site services, but we also provide evening services till 11 p.m. and weekends. That comes in. We get several calls related to emergency services that need help after hours, and they're talking to a live person in our office that's able to help them and to be dispatched if needed. So just wanted to and then we've also went through and making sure that all the buildings have prime fiber connectivity throughout to each facility, so we can provide the fastest communication path for all technology services. So just to relay on some of the projects that we've completed that have drastically benefited the city.
So I just want to say briefly, as far as process goes, I think we hired our, I don't know what to call him, consultant, ad hoc consultant. And one of the reasons we did was to get input about things like renewals of contracts like this. We need to talk to him about it. And if we're not, then I suggest we reconsider whether we need this third-party consultant, because if that's why we got him and we're not going to consult with him, then I think it was a waste of time. So that would be my only input here, that before we go forward, we consult. When we get the proposal from Quality IP, we have that person review it. And we think about we always do this to ourselves, wait until the last minute. We really don't give ourselves enough time to consider sending things out to bid and seeing what else is out there in the world. Because, that's really our responsibility to make sure we're getting the best product for the right price. So I just want to make sure we are conscious of that. And at the very least, we consult with this, I forget his name now, I apologize, our consultant, and make sure that person gives us some feedback.
That's a good idea.
I've been keeping him in the loop as well, and we can even have him come.
I agree with you, Rob. I think that we need to consult with him and consult with him on not just what we need, but how things have gone in his opinion and what we're going to need in the near future. And want to make sure that when we do go into in-person meetings, that our live stream videos still continue to work and that everything's working appropriately and we don't run into some of the issues that we've ran into along the way.
I already asked Katie, and Nick will be coming in sometime next week to test that out. So.
All right. Does anyone have anything else to add? Ryan or Katie, do you guys have anything else to add as far as your update?
Not at this time.
All right. Well, we appreciate you joining us and kind of letting us know what you've been working on. I'm assuming we don't have a management update, but I'll ask.
No, I think I covered it.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so I will end information systems at 6:02.
Thank you.
Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Okay, 6:02, I will start Public Health and Safety Committee. I have 2 items on the agenda this evening. First item is creating 3 part-time dispatch positions from the police department, and that would be Chief Wallace. He and I spoke about this on Friday and today as well. And I'll let him explain some of the questions. I know back in 2019, he had come to us and asking us to get rid of the part-time positions. And Chief and I did talk about this today in regards to bringing them back. And in his defense, when he came on, coming on, trying to see what works best at the time, any type of job in like public health and safety, it's subject to change. And, things can change at a rapid, pace with things. There's been some change in his department. There's going to be some change when this the person in his position, I can't even talk, the person in his department was, took another position in another part of the city for a full-time position on, in the building department. And so he's going to have that position that is a full-time position, which probably, will be promoted from within. There's some part-time people that are going to be changing around, and instead of the position of our full-time people accruing a bunch of overtime, we have several positions that are still open in the part-time sector. So he's hoping that now that he has a better understanding of some of the shifts and the changes that have happened, that he can offset some of the overtime this way and allow some better coverage. So I'll go ahead and I'll let the chief take it from there. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Amy. So one of the things that Amy was talking about was our dispatch staffing 2 years ago was we were pretty thin as far as full-time staffing, and our part-time staffing that we had wasn't very, they were most of the time not reliable. So we depended really heavily on them. And 2 years ago, when I asked to get rid of the part-time dispatchers, it was because the main reason was that we relied too heavily on the part-time dispatchers, and we had 2 shifts every pay period that were needed to be covered with a part-time dispatcher or overtime. So we didn't even have staffing at that time to fill all the shifts that we had available. And so when we did away with the part-time dispatchers, it was to hire a full-time, so that way we could have all of our regular full-time shifts covered. And what we had found over the past couple of years, it wasn't, the thing with our dispatch centers, we dispatch for 10 fire departments and 1 police department. And we are very busy, and to be properly staffed to allow vacations and sick, we need to be staffed at a capacity where we can do that without working a lot of the girls or the people that work in there 12-hour days. And what we really run into an issue whenever we do things like, we do shift bid by seat or a vacation bid by seniority. We only allow 2 off per shift. So there are things that we do to make sure that we have the proper staffing. But when people are on vacation and somebody calls in sick, especially over the past year, it's been a struggle, and there's a lot of overtime. And we just recently had one of our dispatchers, she took another job in the city, and that left us with 9 dispatchers. And the idea would be to have these part-time positions to have a trained 2 or 3, hopefully 3 people that are trained to step in when we have these upcoming, I anticipate some upcoming retirements in the next year or so, and to offset some of the overtime that we have. And one of the things that I did email Amy last week was I talked to a couple other guys I know that are chiefs, and I asked them about their dispatch centers. And we have, just Kent, for example, they have 12 full-time dispatchers and a dispatch coordinator. And we have 10 dispatchers and no coordinator. And one of the things is we're looking moving forward is with possibly some of these upcoming retirements is adjusting the way we possibly moving another dispatch position that we already have, but moving that back into dispatch and making a dispatch coordinator position so that we have a little bit more professional dispatch center. But the reason for these positions is to, like Amy was saying, was to offset some of the overtime, but also to have some trained personnel whenever we do have these unexpected retirements or people that leave. It doesn't happen all the time, but it would be nice to have those positions to try to bring some people that are trained, so there is a little bit of continuity when we do have some unexpected things that come up.
And the experience with this too, the part-time people, will be gaining more and more experience as time goes on. Obviously, a dispatch position isn't, a really easy position just to start if you don't have the experience. So this would also allow, additional training, flexibility, and learning as they go before they would, go into something full-time possibly. So, does anybody have any questions on this?
Will these 3 positions be strictly call-in, or will there be a set part-time schedule for these positions?
They would be, so initially they would come in and they would have to be trained. And then we're not going to give a test until I think the end of July. So by the time we actually get people in here, it's going to be a month or two after that. So we were looking in the fall, and we try to get them in and get them trained. So they would work a few more shifts, but after they go through our training, then they would be available to come in if we needed them for overtime. And there wouldn't be a set schedule, not like we did 2 years ago when we actually, one of the dispatchers that worked for us part-time, she did fill one of those shifts that was open every 2 weeks. So.
And I believe one of the positions, another position that you have some other in your department, you weren't going to fill, correct? So that you can fill these positions. So it's kind of like a balance, you're not really spending any money. We're actually, saving money because it's the overtime, like you said, that you've, had to pay out. This should help cut that down.
So yeah, 2 years ago, we were budgeted quite a bit of money for part-time dispatchers. So the idea again was to use that money that we were budgeted every year to actually try to get us staffed to where we were able to have a little bit more, less lean than we were. We operated at a pretty lean level as far as staffing. And, like I said, compared to other law enforcement agencies in the county, we are very lean in our dispatch center. And when we do have these things that come up, it does take its toll. And it's frustrating for some of the people that, they work quite a bit of overtime. The probably 2 pay periods ago, we had quite a bit of overtime because we had 2 people on vacation. There was some bereavement leave, and I think there was a couple people sick. So we ran into quite a bit of a pick, trying to maintain the schedule, but it's way better than it was 2 years ago. I don't want you guys to think that this is, the decision 2 years ago to get, to get rid of the part-time really helped us, because that again allowed us to be a little bit more structured with our scheduling, and we weren't so dependent on our part-time people that were, they did help out, but they weren't always as dependable as we needed. So having that 10th full-time position was really a help. And
there's no guarantee that you may not in a couple of years go back to where you used to be. I mean, you could say in a couple of years from now, you know what, I decided now this isn't working. I mean, it's not uncommon in your type of work where there's changes that can happen depending on the calls, the need. And, we did take on new, we took on Randolph, was it? I'm trying to remember. So we've taken some additional call centers on. So I imagine that, we are busier than what we were, a few years ago even. So I guess my thing is just because I think, you're asking for this now, it may not be uncommon in another couple of years for another change to happen. So that's what I'm just, letting council know my feelings, and, to not really focus on, what happened in 2019, but right now what's going on and what the need is.
What are the average overtime hours per pay period at this point that the dispatchers are taking on?
Well, can I email you tomorrow, Cheryl?
Yes, that would be
Okay.
wonderful. And with that, if you could also let me know the average number of part-time hours that you would anticipate per pay period. And I'm just trying to determine, are we better off to do 3 part-time, or would we be better off to do a part-time and a full-time? As a dispatcher, I know that is one of the most hectic and stressful jobs there are. I mean, granted, police and fire, I give them all the credit in the world. I would not want to do you guys' jobs, but dispatchers also have a very stressful and hectic, and for the peace of mind and for the training that's involved, I almost feel that I would rather put the training efforts into a full-time position, maybe have a part-time or a per diem position to cover some of those extra gaps, but you almost need a scheduled person on a regular basis to cover those if you're going to cut down on the overtime.
But let's not forget, when you're, hiring a full-time person, you're looking at benefits, retirement, so you're
I
gonna boost up those costs.
I understand that, but to stay competitive and get someone that's going to stay for longevity, Amy, I really feel like you're gonna pull a full-time position in before you're gonna pull a part-time position for dispatching.
And to Cheryl's point, Amy, we do part-time, and maybe this is another meeting, but I'm not going to say I don't agree with Cheryl. I would love to have another person because, again, like I said, there are other dispatch agencies in this county that have less fire departments than we do, and have more staffing. And you're bringing. We were lucky. We have actually a really good crew of people that work for the city, and they're very dedicated. And we got lucky with the last couple people that we hired. We got quite a bit of experience. They came from the sheriff's department, but again, it is difficult sometimes to fill those part-time positions, and that's
I
why
agree. I do agree with that.
we struggled with that with the parking enforcement, trying to find somebody that was would come in and be part-time to do parking.
The training alone on dispatching, I mean,
It's extensive.
it's extremely extensive, and the time that it takes, I just don't feel like part-time could come in off the street and fulfill the need as quickly and as much as we would need. Even an experienced dispatcher, there's training involved if they're not familiar with Ravenna. There's just a lot of things that come with it, and I feel like having that one body that's full time that we could offer those benefits and stuff to is going to secure that position longevity wise compared to trying to get 3 part-time people. And if you've got to train 3 part-time people and they only stay 6 months and you're starting over, then we're wasting money.
Yeah, and I would say that was part of the problem a couple of years ago and historically before that, because we would have people come in and we did have a couple really solid part-time people, but there was the issue of getting them to work, and that's really getting a person in the seat that has some skin in the game or has ownership. So having a full-time job, that's one of the things. And what I'll do is I'll forward this email that I sent out to Amy and the mayor, but in our communications people, but it basically the background of kind of what happened over the past couple of years. And it's not very long, but it talks about some of the plans as far as looking at having a dispatch coordinator. And one of the things that we have historically since my time and before is we get calls from fire departments, and they all have different needs as far as, if something wasn't right or they need something. And so my captain spends a lot of time listening to phone recordings and doing a lot of stuff that really probably isn't his job. So actually having a dispatch coordinator or a supervisor down in our dispatch center that would be able to do that would add a level of professionalism to our dispatch center that, like I said, we are the largest one in the county. So having that would be a huge benefit. And that doesn't involve hiring anybody. That just involves.
I think that's a promotion from within.
Yeah.
That you could give to one of your dispatchers that have, showed the quality of workmanship with that.
Right.
And they could handle dispatching on top of the coordination duties. I believe that's the way that Kent does it. Their coordinator pretty much works full time as a dispatcher, but also handles the coordination duties.
Right.
So Jeff,
Amy, I did want to say a couple of things. I do appreciate, Chief, very much that you're looking at this. If a review of the overtime hours of the past year show those increasing numbers that you talked about, and quite an expenditure in overtime in dispatch center. The other thing, I'm not against the part-time people working. Even if we do bring in another full-time person, those part-time people are filling the gap of the day that somebody's sick, the day somebody's got a personal day, and it's different than another full-time dispatcher that's on a schedule. So it's quite a different thing, and I think it's something that is needed. I would hope that as we look at it with those part-time people, the only way money-wise that it's going to make a difference is if there is an as-needed basis versus an hourly number of days per week hour. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to have a significant savings in the overtime that we've been putting out.
And I agree, Dr. Calfee. Like I said, we do things, like I said, we make sure that, we try to manage the schedule and make sure that there aren't too many people off, but there are the unexpected things that come up, and, the part-time dispatchers would be per diem. They would be just as needed. They would not be 2 years ago where they were almost a vital part of our scheduling.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could almost see it both ways because, where I work, it's a 24-hour type thing as well. And you do have the part-time people, the 20-hour a week people, and your full-time people. So you kind of offset as well. And then you have the per diem that comes in and picks up, every month where the gaps are. So they know, except for the call-offs, but they know the schedule ahead of time, just like everybody else, because if these, person is going to be, scheduled off for vacation, that per diem is going to be scheduled in those spots ahead of time. I'm not sure how you guys do it over there, but, I'll try to get over there before our next meeting. So maybe I have a better understanding on how you do your schedules and so forth, and, set in dispatch if you'd like me to, just so I have a better, understanding.
So I mean, we've talked about mostly justification, and I can't speak to that, but I do somewhat agree with Dr. Calfee that we want to consider the part-time thing too. I think, as you described it, Chief, some of the problems have been when full-time people get those benefits, bereavement, whatever, and if they're unexpected. The only thing I'm asking is what are we doing here? If it's three part-time dispatch positions, then what we need to know is how much is that going to cost? We need action to change the payroll ordinance and how we're going to pay for it. Just the details, I think, is all that's missing as far as I'm concerned. I think the discussion about the justification is on target, and it sounds like it makes sense to do this.
Okay, so as far as the committee, Rob and Matt, I mean, do you want to have two types of, do you want to have one with a full-time person and two part-time people? Do you want to do the 3 part-time people? What do you want the chief to give to us? And Chief, what do you want?
Well, I went what the chief wants, what he thinks is best, and what we can afford too.
Right.
I'm trying to rein it in a minute.
Yeah. And I think that's probably where I have to have a conversation with Brian tomorrow, and talk about that as far as, the wants and needs and all that stuff, but actually having a talk with Brian and figure out what we can afford and what can we do. So
that's the main thing, right?
Yep. So what I'll do is I will have a conversation with Brian tomorrow, and then I will email everybody back with some of the overtime. The overtime hours, we get the monthly stuff, and last year was kind of an anomaly at the end of the year. I know we spent quite a bit of money in December for the overtime and dispatch, but what happened with that was nobody went on vacation because of COVID, and everybody had this time to use, and we just kind of ran into this thing where people were either take their time or lose it, this benefit. So they were taking this time, and we ran into this. We didn't go over budget. We spent a lot of overtime money in December, and it just seemed, whenever we looked at it, it just seemed like a lot, but actually we were under budget for the whole year. So.
Okay. Okay, so Matt and Rob, might I suggest we'll go ahead and move this forward until, we'll hear from Jeff. We'll still get the information at finance. But at this point, as long as it's in the budget, whichever option we're able to use at this point, I mean, we're not really voting on an option at this point. Is it okay that I move this forward with, possibility of it changing, and we'll know before finance on how it is going to change, if it is?
Yeah, definitely move it forward, and maybe Brian can put together both scenarios for us, cost-wise, the three
Okay.
part-time and then possibly a full-time, part-time.
Okay. Rob, is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, Chief, that's what we're gonna do. So we'll go ahead and move this forward, and we'll wait to hear from you tomorrow, okay? Are you still there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. All right, good. Okay, so next item on the agenda, I get them all tonight. Creating a full-time fire marshal position, and that is for the fire department. And I will tell everyone, maybe about a month ago or so, I went over and spent a couple hours with the fire department. I talked to several of the gentlemen, and I have to say, I was really impressed by the data that they have compiled. And, they had so much data that I felt like, wow, I was really impressed. They have been keeping track. They have been, logging everything, looking at numbers, and they did a very good job in the preparation of that. The one thing that I found really interesting that really just didn't set right with me, that this is even possible, is that we actually lose firemen to Akron. Now, with me working in Akron and seeing what, the Akron firemen go through, I would always think to myself, wow, our firemen really, I couldn't imagine having to put up with what some of the bigger cities and the medics and stuff, with the gunshots and, daily that is going on there. And actually, the methodology is why we're losing them is because our fire department is the only fire department around that our firemen are required to do multiple jobs, and also their calls and inspections and truck repairs and multiple things. Firemen that leave actually are going to make more money and do less calls and less of the other stuff. They're only going to be doing straight stuff. So once again, we're training people, and we're investing money in these new firemen, and then they're leaving and they're going to these bigger cities because of the less responsibility, I guess, I would say. And, they're only doing so many calls a day. Right now, our firemen, about 8 calls a day, give or take, and depending too on the severity. The mornings they do, they have it all mapped out of what their day is like. Okay. So it's a complete day of, their truck checks, maintenance on their vehicles. They're saving us money by not, having to send out for repair. We do most of our in-house, truck checks, the house chores, they have to go through training daily. Sometimes they get their lunch, sometimes they don't. They also have to do the inspecting, and also they do, they have to do wrap up of the paperwork. And depending what time, how many calls come through, you have to document everything. So sometimes, that can take lengthy time, which pushes them back. In 2006 was the last time we actually had a real inspection. Okay. And I'm not saying that, stuff goes without inspection, but there are some things that, unfortunately get pushed aside, and they're not able to keep up with all the inspection. The other thing was this position, let me find it. Okay, so this position would be appointed by the chief. It would be at the chief's discretion. This position would be a fire marshal position where this person would be only doing fire marshals or fire inspections. They basically will never be pulled off their job unless we would have a catastrophe and of an emergency of some sort. And yes, then at that time they were expected, obviously, to help. Let me see what other notes I have written down. One thing we talked about is, this position would be a 40-hour-a-week position. It would be a union job. It would be almost at like a lieutenant level. And I'll let Chief Chappell go ahead and take it from what I've just introduced you to. Go ahead, Chief.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, so to back up a little bit, the city had a full-time fire inspector, to my understanding, like in the late 70s, early 80s. They kind of did away with the position. It was George Blindberry. He was brought in from doing inspections to brought on to shift because of staffing and whatnot. And the position just kind of fell to the wayside. With that being said, we have roughly 500-600 businesses in the city as a whole, mom and pop, all the way to big factories, to the hospital, to the courthouse, the administration building and whatnot. All those buildings theoretically should be inspected twice a year. Over the last 10 years, looking back, our average total inspection count is somewhere between 25 on a bad year up to about 50, 60 inspections in a full year. And those inspections are not necessarily from head to toe inspections of a building, making sure that every single emergency lighting is on, extinguishers in date, the sprinkler systems are to code. A lot of those inspections would be renovations of a certain portion of a building that a company called us up and said, hey, can you come out? We need an acceptance test per se to have this pass so that we can, get, occupancy or whatever the case may be. Along with that, when companies call us and say, hey, I need an acceptance test done at 10 o'clock on this day. If I have a 4-man staff and we get hit with back-to-back squad calls, a greater portion of the time that we plan on trying to do an inspection, we end up getting called out on emergency calls that supersede us doing the inspections. By the time we come back, these companies are upset, or they have to go somewhere else to continue work at another agency or whatnot, and they have to reschedule. And it's very hard to get coordinated with these agencies to say that we're going to dedicate somebody to be there, especially when they say we need an inspection done at, say, Parker Hannafin per se, where it may take 2-3 hours to do an inspection. We don't have the resources to dedicate somebody there for 2 to 3 hours, at least twice a year, to say, just go do that inspection and we could go without. I know the conversation was brought up about, you guys spoke earlier about overtime and backfill. Between doing hydrants off duty, shift callbacks when we get hit with the house fires that we get hit with, or multiple squad calls, or just guys getting shift for overtime because someone's hurt or whatever the case may be, guys are already working overtime to where Chief Cleveland was chief. He'd say, well, you guys could come in for a couple hours if you want and do it. We just don't have the resources anymore. And along with that, of the 18 guys that we have on our roster, well, 17 right now, 18, we don't have, not everybody is a fire inspector. It's not a job requirement. We're required to be paramedics, and we're required to have our 2 fire cards. All the gentlemen that are inspectors right now that do inspections for the city went on their own accord to go get the certification and qualification to do the inspections within the city on their own behalf. And there's only 8 or 9 of us that have our certifications to do that. So it could also be a day, and there's many days where guys are working that I don't even have an inspector that's there. So if somebody calls and says, I need an inspection on this date, I can't promise you I even have an inspector available to do it. I could go on and more if you want, but in a nutshell, the guys that we have inspections, being that we're on 24 and 48s, if I have an inspection set up for Wednesday and that's my shift day, I'm not back again until the following Tuesday, which puts another company at least another week out for them to get their inspection done. And you might ask, well, why can't another inspector do that? It's hard for an inspector to come in, pick up where somebody had left off. It's kind of like a judge hearing a trial case. The judge is hearing a case. He's got one thing that's going on that he's listening to the whole thing. And then you're asking somebody to come in and pick up where that judge left off and follow through with it. It's not as easy as it sounds, especially when there's a ton of fire codes out there that you have to know and understand and be able to, enforce and explain to these companies.
Plus, right now, I mean, the liability on the city, if something were to happen, God forbid, I think the liability that we're carrying is pretty high. Especially if, you had something like the Riddle Block, and say somebody was living there and something happened and they died, and, you have an attorney going back, well, when was the last fire inspection done? This should have been caught. So I think we have to also look at it as a liability as well. And I'm for supporting the position.
Right.
I see what, goes on over there from the, what they've showed me. I also, understand why people, some of these firemen are leaving because, they are doing multiple jobs, on with what they're doing and doing the calls, the 911 calls, so I think we need to be consistent and think of a fire marshal position as being proactive and for the safety of our residents.
I have several questions about it, if I could.
Sure.
How many inspections are we required to do? Not suggested, but are required to do?
We are required to inspect every business, commercial, factory, mercantile, whatnot, twice a year. There's a great portion of the businesses in the city of Ravenna that probably have not been touched in 20 plus years.
The question is then, how has it been, if you're required and it hasn't been done, how have we not gotten in trouble in the past over that, if it is a requirement and it hasn't been done?
It's a requirement by the fire code. The problem is
the fire code, but not the law.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. So when we're talking fire code versus what's required by the law. The other question that I had is, for over 30 years now, we've not had this position in here, and yet we have done okay. And this is going to be a solution that's going to be at least an $80,000 solution to the problem. A full-time fire inspector has 2,080 hours a year for fire inspections. And so I just have a lot of questions about it.
I totally understand. The primary purpose of this inspector, and I'm not saying the other gentlemen that are in the department are not going to do inspections anymore. We would fall under that fire marshal's lead. The fire marshal himself, my personal take is that the business, what's the most important is businesses of life safety and commercial. They would take over, like doing the inspections with the state, with the hospital, the nursing homes, the residential group homes,
the schools,
and whatnot. And then the smaller businesses that are, like Wendy's or McDonald's, those would fall on the inspectors that are on staff. And honestly, the inspections that we usually are not able to keep our obligation to are those commercial businesses where they need us to be tied up there for 2 or 3 or 4 hours, and we just can't commit to it.
The other comment I wanted to make is that people leave jobs for a number of reasons, and sometimes it's difficult to attribute to some person that leaves why they leave. Doing additional inspections may be one of a myriad of reasons that a person might leave, but I don't know if it's a significant one that would lead to someone changing jobs.
Right. No, and I understand that. I mean, like you said,
Just a
people-
comment.
No,
Just a
no, I
comment.
understand.
You don't have to respond to it, Chief.
Right. I can't understand. I couldn't explain why somebody decides to leave where they're at myself. You know, Ravenna City was my first job in the fire service as a full timer, and it will be my last. So I don't necessarily understand, you know, everybody's mentality or logic or, you know, reason behind. But, you know, I think what Amy was trying to say is our job is not like a larger department where I'm assigned to an engine company, or I'm assigned to a truck company, or I'm assigned to a med unit, and that's my only job. Our job is diverse, where we run EMS, we run fires, we have a ladder truck, we do inspections, we do public education, we do safety training, we do a lot of the guys in house. Brad, who's I think he's still with us, he does all of our pump maintenance on all of our apparatus. He has gone to school, extensive schooling, to learn how to rebuild fire pumps. And that's not anything that even a larger department can say that they have personnel to do that. Ryan Hall does all of our PMs on even the big engines, the oil changes, general maintenance, all the, you know, everything we're doing with the fuel systems and whatnot. And it's just, you know, there's just, you know, there's a lot of responsibility that falls, that trickles down. And I think what happens to some people is they don't want to be the jack of all trades, let alone the master of all trades. They rather just be isolated to have one area of expertise. And that might be their reason why they decide to go somewhere else.
And I appreciate yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Amy. If I could just hop in. I know this is not something new, so I appreciate you bringing this back up, Chief. And I think the one thing that sticks out to me when we're having this conversation is the auction house that was, you know, 2 years ago, and that was front page news of, you know, kind of missing or having the conversation after the business was open about number of people we could have in there and just the fire code, getting it up to date. So any way we could head off any of those future conversations, I think is a good one. And we did it similar to Amy when I was at Summit County. You know, the city of Akron would announce on a certain day, and you'd have a couple guys. So they had maybe multiple fire marshals, but they had the one guy that they were listening to, and then the staff was running out. The actual firemen were running out with a clipboard and making sure that some of these businesses were up to speed with what was going on. So
we're bringing new businesses in. We're selling old businesses to bring new businesses in. I mean, I think we're opening ourselves up to a lot, you know, a liability as well. And I want to be proactive and support our police and fire as much as I can. And I think that the thought of somebody, you know, possibly losing their life in a fire as a result of something that wasn't inspected, we've been lucky so far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Rob?
Again, yeah, this is deja vu from 15 minutes ago. I mean, it's just all about justification, and we could sit here for, you know, every meeting and talk about justifications, why we need this position, I don't know what it is. I mean, you know, you said it would be appointed by the chief. Would this not be a civil service position?
They weren't sure when I talked to him last, Rob. The amount of money, I know. I'm sorry. I assumed it would have been on the tracking sheet, but it wasn't.
It would be a civil service position.
Yeah.
Ideally, we would like to try to see if anybody inside that is familiar with the city, that is an inspector, that would want to proceed and pursue into this. But you'd already have to, you know, it'd be better if you already had your inspector certification and then plan review and whatnot, the education, the training that is already put in place so that you can step right into it. but I think what Amy's trying to say about by discretion of the chief, their hours being on a 40-hour work week would be on my discretion, or whoever the chief would be, full-time chief would be at that point. So if whether it's 410s, 5/8s, it might involve some evenings, because there's businesses that are open only at night that cannot provide a fire inspection in a factory or whatnot, because they're too busy during the day, where management whatnot can't walk you through, and you can do things from top to bottom. So their work schedule would be 40 hours, but it would be basically set up by the discretion of the fire chief.
Well, look, I'm just saying, I want to know what the position is. I mean,
We don't have the
we got-
description out yet.
Well,
Heather,
look, the sheet we have says ordinance allowing the mayor to create the position. Well, I mean, that's what we do. We have to create the position in the payroll code. So is this a lieutenant? Is it a captain? Or is it a unique position? How much is it? All those details need to be
right.
kind of bundled in, because I'm hearing the justification and everything makes sense. But we have to answer the questions. Can we afford it? Is it the right level? All those things have to be part of the mix too. So I appreciate all the justifications, all the reasons for doing this. And I agree with them. I mean, I've had no reason not to, but I want to know what it is. I want to know, what the position looks like and how much it's going to cost, the logistics that we have to.
I understand. And I
do to put this
apologize that,
ordinance together.
yeah, I apologize it wasn't there. I thought the tracking sheet was going to be submitted. And, I did meet with Heather. The administration had previously talked with her. We did discuss, the information. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, it did not get submitted with that. We can get that emailed out to everyone as soon as, it gets prepared. I think they wanted us to talk about it a little bit, is my guess why we didn't get it.
When we submitted and when we talked, I submitted the tracking sheet. I didn't put down what the pay ordinance would be, because we don't have a definitive pay ordinance. But talking with Brian and Heather and whatnot, we figured with benefits, we're going to be somewhere between $90,000 and $100,000 a year.
I think that sounds a little bit more.
We wanted to create, when we thought about creating the position, since a major responsibility, more so than just a regular fire inspector, this person's going to be in charge of that prevention bureau. Yes, he may be the only full-time fire, or she. I said person, didn't I?
You said he. That's
no,
okay.
I'm sorry. He or she, I'm sorry, will be their full-time responsibility. And everybody else who's an inspector will fall underneath them. So that's why we thought that person would have to have a little bit more of a pay incentive versus just coming in as an entry level, what would be equivalent to an entry level firefighter.
Can I ask a question quickly? The tracking sheet says safety inspections and education. Could you, and you may have already touched on it, but could you clarify what that education piece would be?
The education would be for like the schools, like learn not to burn and stuff like that. Anything that we would do for public safety speaking in the schools with the kids and whatnot. Also for like the senior centers, we could go in and go over fire safety, education with the seniors is what we did before, like in Prospect House in East Town and whatnot.
Also, I can remember you guys providing carbon monoxide detectors years and years ago. There was a lot of different benefits, I think, that even with the smoke alarms and stuff, I can remember years ago, my parents going to the fire department to get a smoke alarm. So I don't know if that was with Blindberry or not, but I can remember that. So it would be nice to see, more of the outreach, more of safety preventative things, if to get grants, say for fire detectors, batteries for fire detectors. I think all of that would go along with this position. We were also talking about it being like a PR position when there's time, like you said, for outreach and, you know, preventative and safety measures as well.
Right.
Thank you for clarifying. I know that just in the last couple of weeks, I mean, we've seen a lot of concerns with fires and families losing their homes, and that's why, you know, that is important, and we need to make sure that we can get people the things that they need. So no, thank you.
No, you're welcome. The position also, you know, would fall under like the PIO, because like a lot of like the paper has been calm right now because of the last two house fires that we had back to back on Thursday and Friday, wanting, you know, releases and like Amy had brought up, you know, their primary job would be they would not be taken off doing fire prevention, anything fire prevention wise from their workday. However, they would still be a 240 firefighter and a paramedic. So if we did run into a shortcoming at night or whatever the case would be, they could also backfill or come in for a house fire and whatnot after their 8-hour, 10-hour day and help, you know, alleviate some of the lack of resources that we currently have.
Matt, with you being on this committee, is there any comments or questions that you have?
No, I don't have any additional comments. I would just like to see a little more details to this individual's responsibilities and costs, and like we're going to do with the same with the dispatchers. And then I think we take a look at that and make a decision from there.
Okay.
Okay. Rob, are you agreeing upon that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything Matt said is right on target.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Mark, if I will give you the opportunity to maybe you and I, or you and Brian, to get with Heather and draft up something, and, you know, we can get this out to council to look at, and then we can, you know, discuss it at finance. Is that okay with everyone?
Good.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and I'll move this forward. And anything else to bring up under management updates?
Not directly. I would say at this time that at the next meeting of the committee of the whole, I'm going to ask for an executive session to discuss personnel. We're presenting things to you tonight that are expensive. And we have to be sure we can sustain it. Yes, we could make this work. I could make it work till I leave, and then leave somebody else with a mess if we overspend. We're going to take a look at, we have not presented everything tonight. There are other things, but some of that involves individual personnel and has to be done in executive session. This fire person, we brought both the police and the fire up to council standards. After we, with the levies that were passed, the funds, the public approved the funds. And it took us 2 or 3 years to get out of the hole we were in, where we had about a $100,000 carry to begin with. And last year it was 4 million. And now if you look at that account, it looks like we're very wealthy, but there's one-time money in there. And you can't figure on that sustaining these sorts of positions for any length of time. I think the need for a fire inspector is obvious with that. But there are some things that we have to work out on that haven't been discussed tonight, because if you're going to give it a rank of lieutenant, and it's somebody who's got their fire license, but they've been in the business 2 or 3 years, and you're going to hire a minute lieutenant, I don't know what kind of issues you have with the union at that point in time, but this would be a union job. The other thing, as we go forward with this, I am looking for someone who is very sensible and knows the laws well, but works with merchants in particular. They haven't been inspected for years. We can't walk in the door and say, this has to be fixed, this has to be fixed, this has to be fixed, and you have until noon tomorrow, or I'm going to close you down.
And I did bring that up to them. When we were talking, I said that was one I know of the biggest fears you had and over this position. And the last thing we want to do too, because of the lengthy time that has gone in between, the person I would say would have to have a personality and, be able to communicate effectively and understand the situation.
Our goal is to make the town and the businesses safe. It's a worthwhile goal. We'll have to look at all of these things that we're talking about to see how it affects the budget. And keep in mind, we're going to be starting the budget because we have to have July 1st, the revenue budget in place, which ends up being the budget for next year for the most part. We make minor adjustments to it, but for the most part, it's in place when we finish in July. And so we're starting to have meetings on those at this point in time to get those things in place. And Brian, Tammy, and Denise are in the best seats to tell us exactly where we're at.
I was under the impression, Mayor, that the one thing I did ask, before we even brought this to committee, I did talk with Heather and ask if the administration, supported this. And she said, yes, they were on board. So that's why I did bring it.
Yeah, I am, but I'm also have to be cognizant of budgets.
Okay. Right. I think we all do.
You know me, I don't spend money I don't have. We have to make sure we can sustain this, because putting it out there and only running it for a couple of years and then have to pull it back because you're out of money, that isn't going to help us. This has to be long range to do us any good. So I do support it, and we're going to look at it. But I want council, Rob has mentioned each time, justifying is not, that's the easy part. Funding is the hard part. We'll be looking at that. And I'm very much in favor of having this person, because the other part, I don't know if you discussed that or not. I'm sorry, I had to get up and walk around because I was getting leg cramps from the work my wife had me doing yesterday with that. But we have a good reputation with our building department. And quite honestly, Mr. Finney on occasion is called, he fills in sometimes on some of the stuff that a fire inspector would take care of with that. But we have a good reputation of when people are building and developing new businesses and properties, that we do not hold them up. Stuff does not lay on our desk. It gets done quickly. And what happens with the fire department people, they work every third day. And if they don't get the thing done, they don't go back until 3 days later. Well, I can tell you right now, there's no contractor on earth that wants to sit around 3 days waiting on a fire person to come and tell them it's okay to go ahead with that. So this person would speed up that process. And it's not that we have that much of it, but you'd be surprised. I watched Chris Singleton doing them out at Cernus when they expanded. And they had to be out there pretty regularly to see stuff before it gets cement poured over it and you can't see it anymore. So there's a timing issue. And I'm going on too much for this. You'll be here for breakfast. So I'm going to stop.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I will go ahead and end public health and safety. Thank you, everyone.
All right, at 6:59, I will call the Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting to order. We have 4 items on the agenda this evening. The first one is the 2021 pavement marking and striping. I believe the bids were opened. Mr. Finney, do we have a best low bidder and a cost?
We do not. We do not yet. Board of Control has to meet, but we will have an answer for Monday night's meeting.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions?
The next two, I'll just,
If not, we'll go ahead and move that forward for now. The next two.
so I'll just move on to the next two. All right, want me to go? Want me to
Go
speak?
for it.
All right. I'm going to wrap the next two together. AMATS, our Metropolitan Planning Organization, has had 2 emergency funding rounds to spend carryover balance along with COVID money that they received. We did not apply for a 2022 project because we were already committed with our current projects. But we did apply for 2 projects for 2023 and 2024, which is South Prospect Street from Main Street South and Main Street North, and the North Prospect Street. A few of you might remember in 2010, we had our ERA Fund project, which we paved both of these sections at one time. And I think the total price was about $800,000 in 2010. So only certain streets in Ravenna are considered federally classified. Therefore, those are the only streets we can apply for the AMATS grants. So for this round, we split it up. For the 2023 and 2024 rounds, we split up South Prospect Street as one project, North Chestnut Street as one project. South Prospect Street being a little smaller than North Chestnut Street. About 3:30 p.m. today, it appears as though we're going to get awarded the North Chestnut Street project for 2024 paving. And that's a $630,000 project. 20% would be our cost, so that's right around $126,000. I was actually shocked that North Chestnut scored higher than South Prospect, but that's how the numbers rolled out. So we're pretty pleased with that. We will have another open round of funding at the end of this year that we will reapply for South Prospect Street. And I'm pretty confident that we'll get that funding. That will be, it's hard to say this actually, that would be funded for 2026 construction or resurfacing. So this ordinance is authorizing the mayor to apply for at this stage.
Very good. Sounds like good news.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Any additional questions on those 2 AMATS grants? If not, we'll go ahead and move that forward as well. And then the last item on the agenda is to vacate Edgewood Avenue. Was that a request?
Yeah, yeah, that's the property owners on both sides of this alley have requested it be vacated. And I had sent maps to you guys, or I'm sorry, I included them with the tracking sheets. Did I send them out? I can't remember.
Yeah, you did.
Splitting up the 2 parcels, how the homeowners are asking for it to be split up. And this would create additional building parcels for both of them, or sellable lots for that matter. We do not have utilities through this. I know there's a storm, kind of a storm ditch that runs through there, but it's actually to the south of this parcel, which is evidenced by the utility drawing that I had shown. You can see a yellow line that heads east of Linden Street.
Have we received any requests like this from other homeowners around the city? Sorry, I'm jumping in with a
Oh,
quick
absolutely.
question, but
Yeah, this is pretty common. This is pretty common. There's a table in our codified ordinance listed as vacations. I think it's appendix or whatever the tracking sheet is. Whatever I wrote, I don't have the tracking sheet with me, but and that's where these vacations get added as part of our codified ordinances. But over the years, there's been multiple vacations. Not a huge amount, but I know many years ago, Mark Gabriel was pushing to have a lot of these streets vacated so we didn't have to maintain them. In this specific case, in theory, if a tree would fall over onto somebody's property, the city would have the responsibility to clean that tree up because it is our property.
Do we then just give the property to the property owners on each side?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're responsible for all the legal fees. They're responsible to hire the surveyor, and the surveyor would have to draw up the vacation plat. They would have to submit the vacation plat to the county and have it recorded. Whatever title fees might be included, they would have to pay. So the city would bear no cost.
Yeah, we've done these before
Okay.
over the years at no cost to the city.
And it looks like it just goes through the woods right now. You said there was possibly a sewer underneath part of it, but it's like, it appears to be about 80 feet by 400 feet. And I don't know what that is in acreage or anything. Do we have an approximate size of how much it is that we're taking out? And if you don't, that's okay. You don't need to take time to do it, Bob.
I think you're pretty accurate in what you're saying. It's either 60 or 80 feet wide and close to 400 feet. Might be 380 feet, but yeah, you're
Okay.
pretty close.
Okay. And in the map, then it shows which portion of this would go to Beeka and which portion would go to Blankenridge.
Brackenridge, correct.
Okay.
That's what was conveyed to me. They might tweak that a little bit, but this is what it was conveyed to me.
is there any good reason that we would keep it? I mean, why we wouldn't turn it over? Is there any reason?
No, and somebody had pointed out to me, and I'd have to talk to Semino again. But dedicated streets that aren't being utilized are it's my understanding they are to go to the both sides of the street. And I don't know if we have some legal obligation. I can't remember where I read that, or if that's something that Mr. Bowen had told me in his surveying laws. I know he keeps up on all that stuff still as a licensed surveyor. But no, we would have no reason. We would have no intent to ever extend that road. If I were to extend roads, that certainly wouldn't be that stretch. There would be many others I would extend before this.
Okay. I have no other questions. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? If not, we'll go ahead and move that forward as well. Is there a management update?
No.
Okay, at 7:08, I will adjourn the Streets and Sidewalks Committee meeting.
All right, 7:08, I will convene the planning committee meeting. We have a single item on the agenda. When I first got notice of this, I thought it would be a fairly simple thing. And it didn't turn out that way. I think some of you have seen some correspondence from a concerned citizen, and I know at least one person on the commission has reached out to me. The basic changes, and you all got them, they're in your packet, are really not substantial in my opinion. There's been some difficulty convening the commission because of the number of required members. And part of this is just to reduce the number of members so that they don't run into problems with holding meetings and not having a quorum and that kind of thing. There's some changes in deadlines, how long it takes before a meeting to submit an application and so forth. But in the translation of getting this changes, some people have reached out who want more substantive changes to the way the commission does its business. And, you know, it's certainly worth looking at some of those changes. But I don't, you know, I think there needs to be an orderly process for them to be considered. One of the things I would like to see happen, and it kind of is coincidental or whatever you want to call it, is that I think I'd like to have these things discussed when we're back meeting in person. Because meetings like this don't give the opportunity for those concerned citizens to voice their opinion other than to send us emails or those kinds of communications. So, you know, this body is meant to be a public entity, and I would like to delay these. I don't think the changes are going to be that impactful. And if we're going to be meeting again in person a month from now, that's when I'd like to bring these up. And then if other people want to bring up other changes, that's fine. The only thing I've told the people who've reached out to me, and I will tell you, is that I do think that the commission itself should have an opportunity to respond or review any kind of changes proposed by anyone. So I want this to be a thoughtful process. Eventually, if we do make changes, I think there should be a public hearing for us to really consider them. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about these changes, the ones at least that we were sent. I don't know if it's appropriate to consider ones that have been proposed ad hoc, but so I'll just open it up, see if anybody had any thoughts about what you read in the packet. Or if Bob or the mayor wants to weigh in on these proposed changes.
Well, I think you've made a good decision. There are some things that work all right with Zoom, and there are others that don't. And I think on that particular one, people need to be in the room.
Okay.
Was there, just a quick question, I don't want to get too deep down the rabbit hole, but a reason for just looking at this, you know, prompting the review?
Well,
was it because people couldn't make it?
It's been an ongoing discussion, especially with meeting remotely, that there have been times when they couldn't have a quorum. So I think the immediate concern was to change the membership. Am I right about that, Mayor? The mayor serves as the chair, I believe, of the commission.
But if we're not meeting, we're going back to in-person meeting. Is it, you know, a priority then?
There is actually there is an appointed chair to run the meetings, and it's Mr. Hoxley runs them. By name, I'm a member of it on there, and I could chair it. We've designated him as my representative. They allow that sort of latitude. I do attend them when I can with it. There are some direct, there are a few people that believe that anything this group does should purely be recommendations and not binding. And there are others who are strong preservationist and believe very strongly in about the historical legacy of the city. and that their job is to protect that. If it was totally just by recommendation, I'm not sure why we'd make people go to it. There has to be some degree of, this is just me thinking out loud, and it's, I can promise you it's not the gospel. But I think there has to be some ability to have some teeth in it somewhere in order to do it. The way it functions best is when people come in and are doing something with a piece of property that has historical value. They have, what I have seen is that they have made recommendations. And I can think of a house out on East Main Street. They made recommendations to them, and the people followed them, and they were very happy with the finished product on the siding on the house. And it retained its original character. But that always costs more money. I think that then there's a group that's on there that believes you ought to be able to do what you want to with your own property within certain limitations. And we should not be telling people that they have to have certain windows or paint their house a certain color or that sort of thing. And I don't know that they've ever done that. They might recommend it. But the thing that we had the biggest issue on that caused some of this breach was the windows in the building that's across from the jewelry store and the toy store. The toy store is on the bottom floor of the building, and the gentleman who bought that, who owns the jewelry store, was putting windows in, and they would not approve the windows that he was going to put in. He was just going to put windows in. They thought that there should be some sort of design to keep the character of the building. And ultimately, he was able to put the windows in, and they did a little something with some sort of a format. But I think that we need to have the open discussion because we need to have the correct direction. And I'm not telling you I have the correct direction, but we need to arrive at one. And then we follow the guidelines as they're established by council.
Yeah, and Andrew.
Rob, I want to, hang on, Rob.
Okay, good.
I want to add, what you have in front of you is primarily administrative changes. We had started working on these before COVID, and these changes are known by the design review committee. The number was being reduced because it was difficult to, it's difficult to get people to serve on a committee at 10 o'clock in the morning. So it's almost a certain segment of our population that we're looking for, potentially somebody that's retired, and the criteria that fits, we've moved, say, an architect to a business person, or a business person that was an architect to meet all of these. So that's one, those are some of the numbers that are reason these things are being changed, and allowing the mayor to appoint people that aren't necessarily either from the chamber or a technical person or a local business person type of a thing. The thought is we, if I'm not mistaken, 2 or 3 of the members were appointed this year on a 1-year term. So their term could expire. If you read through how each term expires and they're supposed to overlap to some degree, you'll understand. And then one of the other items are, I believe, our current with the statement, I guess it's F, that says within 2 weeks. Well, we were looking to change that to make it 4 weeks. If not, and somebody submitted the day after a meeting, then we have to have another meeting 2 weeks later. And that doesn't fit. So we're making it that we're gonna, in essence, the design review would meet once a month. A couple of these other changes, the deal with minutes, pretty minor stuff. So these specific changes that have been requested, again, are strictly administration, not the actual duties of the design review. That is going to be a discussion I agree, it needs to be in person, and it's definitely going to get emotional.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that. Well, and yeah, so.
I won't look forward to it.
Well, a little bit of sarcasm there.
But again, the design review knows about these changes.
Oh, I know.
They've seen these, we vetted them out, albeit a year ago, but.
Well, it was finally, I asked for some background information. It does seem to be minutes from our February meeting this year where they were approved. So yeah, I thought these would be just simple changes and we would move forward and so forth. But I think given the fact that there are some who want to voice their opinion about the more substantive stuff, let's give them the opportunity, and we'll give them the opportunity while we consider these other less important, somewhat mundane changes. Let's do it all at one package when we're back meeting, and again, hopefully in a month or so. And we'll let it play out. We're not going to do one of these things. We have a hearing and then vote on it the same night. We'll give them some time. We do want to hear them. I mean, we may not always agree with everything, but we might find something that gets proposed that we should, consider and make some changes. I think we have an obligation to people who voice these concerns to listen to them.
I agree. And they work hard, they attend meetings, and it's hard to get volunteers as it is, and, we do have some dedicated volunteers that put a lot of passion and heart behind some of their decisions.
Okay. All right. So there's nothing to move forward at this point, but we will bring this back to the committee again when we're meeting in person. So is there a management update?
No.
Okay, then at 7:21, I will adjourn the planning committee.
And at 7:21, I will convene the Community and Economic Development Committee. We have one item on the agenda tonight for the modification to the CRA map. Mr. Finney?
Oh, I don't need to take this. You can. I've submitted two. I've submitted two proposals. Well, that's true, but the two from last week, the end of the week, and I had a little bit of a dialogue with this. As I stated in the email, the immediate needs is for a business proposal in town that's adjacent to our existing CRA. So for us to expand that it's important to support the business that's been proposed. And to my knowledge, it is still moving forward. I haven't heard otherwise. In conversations with Cheryl and the mayor, we are the other proposal is to consider the whole city as a CRA. And we felt that we would let city council decide which direction that they wanted to go. So tonight we're hearing just the map.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My opinion, first of all, we need to
Go ahead, Amy.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, we definitely have to do the short expansion and get that in ASAP. If we could implement the full CRA at the same time, it's always easier to do one job completely than to piece it together. Time, expense, all of that together. I would like to see the whole city put into the CRA as soon as possible. But if we can't do that in the timing that we need to for this business then we have to do what we have to do and piece it out. But I would recommend that as soon as we would get that small expansion done, we move forward and do the citywide.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea moving forward with the city, and I know that the entire city, and I know other council members have voiced that in the past. So if we could do it all in one rather than piecemeal it, like you just said, Cheryl. I don't mean to justify this more than it needs to, Rob. But I'm trying to get other people to chime in.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Cheryl. After she had explained when we had a meeting a couple weeks ago, and with Bob, and the pros I think outweigh anything else of having the whole city as a CRA, and we are progressively moving forward. And I think this needs to be part of the plan to continue this.
Does anyone have any questions or input?
Well, just keep in mind that if you want to move forward with that, all of the conditions for the CRA have to be written up.
Right.
You can't just say we want to have a CRA and you're done.
Yeah, there's steps that we have to follow to complete the process. But I think the first,
You'll have to make some decisions about what percentages you're going to allow.
and I think we can do that right now. I think the biggest thing is to see if anyone has any concerns with doing it citywide. And then we can narrow down on the particulars of the different percentages between the different residential and things like that. There are 2 proposed bills with HB, I don't remember the numbers offhand, right now that are in the process of getting approved. And if those get approved, it's taking the CRA back to prior to 1994 restrictions, which back prior to 1994, the CRA was created specifically for promotion of residential improvements. So if it does get approved, citywide completely makes sense. Plus we have small little pocket areas throughout the city that are zoned, industrial or commercial that's, next to a residential area. Now with our zoning changes, some of those might change, some may not. But we do have some areas that there could be new construction, whether it be residential or commercial or industrial, that the CRA definitely could benefit. What we're talking about with percentages is the percentages of the tax breaks on that residential. If it was a residential infill, one of these vacant lots where maybe the land bank had demolished a property and somebody wants to build a house on it, we could give them the full benefit of the CRA tax break. But if it's a development situation where they're going to be putting in 50 new houses, do we want to just do a 50% tax break to those properties? Different ideas, different thoughts, something to think about. We definitely want the input of everybody on that, what your thoughts are, but those are what we're looking at for when we say different percentages and different ways that we have to write up the ordinance.
But tonight specifically, we can just approve one of these 2 maps and move forward, and then later this summer work on the percentages. We don't have to change the percentages tonight.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, and Bob knows, we had a plan not too long ago that kind of had those broken down by residents and business. So Bob, if you still have that, you might want to dig it up and we can kind of refer to that as a starting point. But it sounds like Cheryl's also done a lot of homework on it too. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be hard to figure out how to piece it together.
I would tell
Currently,
you,
I'm aware of 2 new homes. Currently, I'm aware of 2 new homes on Lake Avenue that will probably start construction this summer. So, and I don't anticipate us being able to iron out, if we went citywide, I don't anticipate us ironing out these percentages until probably August, September. So as far as that's, you know, to me, I look at that quite a bit different than a whole subdivision that would possibly get started. And so we have time to deal with that. And there's a couple other major business proposals that, yeah, it's not a very well-kept secret that, again, we're still a year away from them breaking ground if they were to.
Right. We got.
So we have time to
figure
do
it out.
that, but the map portion, we don't. Right.
What is the downside to making the entire
Hopefully we'll be
city?
in person by then.
What is the downside of making the entire city in the CRA area?
Personally, I don't think there is one. There is a little bit of concern of the workload that might go on staff for applications. My opinion is that people are not going to apply if it's not going to be a big enough benefit. If they're putting a roof on their house and we write the ordinance correctly and strict enough, it's not going to qualify, so they're not going to be putting an application in for that. If they're putting a $60,000 addition on their home, then they might apply to see. But if you're not going to get a big enough tax break, you're not going to waste your time with the paperwork to try to get it.
You
So
have
there-
to keep in mind, we do not get to make that decision. The county makes it.
And
What
then,
the-
I'm sorry, then we do lose the tax money.
Well, it's not necessarily, think about it this way, Tim. It's tax money we don't currently have.
Right, okay. right.
Okay, so for 10 years, they get a discount on their taxes, but after that 10 years, we get the additional taxes. So we're
Mhm.
not losing, but in 10 years, we're gaining.
Yeah, a new developing, booming town would not ask their entire town to be in a CRA. We're in
Right.
a little bit different situation than that. Okay. I would be in favor if it wouldn't slow down helping Mr. Miovitz get his work done to go ahead and request for the whole city.
Thank you. Matt, anything?
No, I'm okay with moving everything forward as well at this time if we can, if it's not gonna cause problems in the short term.
Christina?
What does the baby think about it, Christina?
Telling you what, I'm okay with it. And the baby says she says it's okay too, yeah.
Okay.
Any management updates?
No,
Well, if there's nothing else, then we'll adjourn at 7:32.
Have a good night, everyone.
Respond to that email too, if you can, that I sent out earlier about meeting in person. Appreciate it.